Ooh, the Golden Stallion here. So there was a little bit of a flub here. What you are about to hear is your October 2018 Sovryn Tech Patreon only live Q&A hangout. I do these once a month, and what I ended up doing is, so usually the links that I post for this, it uses Google Hangouts, which that might be changed. Well, I've been dying for it to change, actually. So what happens here is it uses Google Hangouts, and I don't make the link because Hangouts is a very, very fickle thing, and I've learned about this over the years on how it lets you set things up. I can't create the link days in advance and just put it in the post so that everybody can come join. So I usually do a post about an hour, sometimes earlier in the day, that actually provides the links for people either to join the Hangout or to, just interact via YouTube. Now, what ended up happening with this October's just been crazy because I even originally flubbed what day it was going to be. And then, when the day came, I actually ended up using the wrong links. I ended up using September's links for this episode. And so at first I'm talking, and then suddenly, I have some gracious Sovryn Tech patrons, including co-host Robin. He starts messaging me, hey, we got September's links here. They're the wrong links. And then I had to resend out the links. And so I don't think we got everybody in at first. In fact, at first I'm kind of talking by myself. And so I repeat a few things later on in the episode, but I'm going to let it stand raw. Okay. As is. And the video for it as well is in the show notes. But really mid show, there's some points where, one thing I've learned as a broadcast journalist, you never want dead air. There's a couple moments of just a second or two of dead air. And that's there because I'm actually trying to get out the links to all the patrons as quickly as possible to log in. I didn't want to restart the show because then you have to, believe me, it's just an absolute pain in the ass. The best thing to do is to just, as Queen would say, the show must go on, right? And, you just keep rolling. So if you're wondering what happens kind of in the middle of this, or not in the middle, within the first 5 minutes, what ends up, I'm wondering, I'm wow, where is everybody? Usually there's a few people that come into, at least to watch it on YouTube. And wow, where is everybody? And I found out I sent out the wrong link, so nobody was there. So if you're wondering what happens at first, I'm just leaving it in, and I'm just giving you this little intro to let you know what happened. And you can enjoy the rest of it. But once it gets past that point where people start joining, then we get people coming into the Hangouts and everything. And it ends up being honestly, there's a great tech question about Squirrel, the technology Squirrel, SQRL, by Steve Gibson. And then it turns into a very gaming centric episode of the show, or episode Hangout. And always remember, you control what the Hangout content is about. You come into the YouTube, you can ask questions right in the YouTube chat, or you can come right in the Hangout and ask questions. Okay. So, if you're not so much into the gaming talk, well, then you come right on in and, you ask your questions. And if there are questions that I can answer, and I like to think I can answer just about anything, or at the very least, I can be honest enough to say when I don't know, and, and you can do that. So, but I thought it was actually a conversation that goes far beyond the gaming industry as far as the importance of it, and I think there gets into some very interesting economic theories later on. So I highly recommend that you listen to it, even if you're not a gamer, because I think the gaming industry is set to change dramatically, and the conversation we end up having especially towards the end of this, really highlights perhaps where it's going, and that I haven't seen a lot of other gaming journalists even bother to discuss or talk about. So interesting stuff. Anyway, that's it. We'll get right into the episode here, and we'll let it ride out. So I'll see all of you. Off to Dreamland. Here, go listen to the October live Q&A Hangout. Have fun. Woo! Woo! The Golden Stallion is here, baby. Ready for your October live Q&A Hangout. And I know what you're asking. I already know what the first question is. Where the hell is my Sovryn Tech? Well, don't worry. It is coming. It's actually going to get released later tonight. There's some special stuff getting cooked up with it. And, we got to make it hot. We got to make it work. And we're getting ready for episode 300. So that's pretty important. And so with that in mind, that's exactly what's going on. Like that's what we're waiting on, and it'll be done and out later tonight. So it's kind of weird. I actually planned on it being out well ahead of when I was going to do the October live hangout here, but it didn't end up working out that way. So don't worry, Sovryn Tech will be out today. It'll be out later tonight, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Actually, well, personally, I enjoyed the hell recording it, so I can't wait for you to hear it. And then we got next week, we got episode 300 that's going to drop like it's hot. And I can't wait to share that with you as well and hear what you all think about it. But anyway, we are not here for that right now. We are here for your live Q&A hangout, and we need to start breaking into that. I did get a couple of questions in preloaded, and I will get to those, and we will talk about those. One of those is actually a great tech question to break down into looking into the future of tech and how that goes. And anyway, I will say this, a couple things before we get into those preloaded questions. It's weird. In the past 2-3 months, I want to say, there has been a drop of approximately 20 patrons. And I'm not exactly sure why. Sometimes people tell me why. Oftentimes they do not. So here's the funny thing is that most people don't realize this with Patreon, unless you check on a very specific setting, you can tell what other people like patronize, right? Who they're patrons for. And so when I drop, but yet they're still patrons to other people, it's kind of hard for me to think that it's just like a money issue, even though I know, I certainly respect and know that sometimes people have money issues. I can really respect that. But in any case, really honored, by all of you that are sick of. Some of you, a lot of the patrons have been patrons for years now, honestly, and I'm really, really honored by that. And I know so many of you listen. Actually, like I've talked about recently, it's kind of amazing to me, but a lot of people just listen to the Patreon content and they don't even listen to the Sovryn Tech Prime episode, which makes me wonder sometimes, like if a person, I think you kind of have to be more of a name. I'm like a Z class celebrity. Okay, maybe a Y class, maybe an X class. I don't know. But with that in mind, I can't, I don't think I have the name power to where I could just do like Patreon. Oh hell. Okay. Hold on. I put out the wrong link. That's what's going on. Let me get the right link out there. And I am going to try to keep talking while I put out the right link. Let's get we got to grab all these links. See, this is what happens when you are an incredibly busy person. And this is why I don't think I could ever get away with just doing a Patreon only episode. I was wondering why nobody was showing up. So, okay. So nobody heard, nobody heard the opening to this. Here we go. All right, we're going. We're gonna rock this. We're gonna do great. Okay. So there we go. And you're gonna have you never want blank audio, but people are gonna be able to hear this for the first time. And then we're gonna get the Hangout link out. And I can't believe I did that. It almost makes you want to restart the show, but we'll run with it. We'll run with it. So. And then we'll just edit it in the actual thing, and you're going to hear me talking about all this editing. Okay, so while I'm doing this, while I'm setting all this up, I want to actually, something I was going to bring up and tell you is that, honestly, I've been enjoying the hell out of, and I know this will surprise some people because everybody was expecting this to be a really childish show, but I have been enjoying the hell out of Star Wars Resistance, and we might talk more about that as more patrons come in. And there we go. That I really, it's weird because with Star Wars in general, I often feel like, let's see if people start showing up now. With Star Wars in general, actually, I need to push out the update. Isn't this, this is just the most exciting audio you're ever going to hear. Believe it or not, I've heard worse. Like I've really heard worse, significantly worse, where poor people, like no one's coming into their Hangout whatsoever. That's weird because I think I've got one person on the Hangout, but I guess it's because it's unlisted, or hell, maybe that's just me. So, all right. We'll see if some other people end up getting in on the Hangout, and I guess we'll probably run a few minutes after that. But this makes for very interesting audio, I would say, outside of that. And so, like I was saying about Star Wars Resistance, I've been enjoying the hell out of this show, and I have been surprised, frankly, at how often I have laughed while watching this show. I mean, like I have actually laughed my ass off while watching it. There is the one character, now terribly, I can't think of his name, because you know what they fucked up? Let me tell you what they fucked up. They fucked up the order in which they were playing these things. Let's see if people end up joining the podcast here or getting in on it, because yeah, I did send the wrong link, and hopefully they'll get the update. So I will just edit this later, and the video won't be as much fun to watch because there's going to be points where there is nothing on the video. So let's do one more edit, and maybe then people can get in. As soon as people start joining, go ahead and comment for me in the YouTube chat if you're there. Let's see. Thanks. Everybody again. See if that gets everybody in here. Can't believe I did that. No, I can totally believe I did that. All right, now people are coming in. We're getting in. Okay. So anyway, after that little kerfuffle, I won't restart the whole thing because then I'd have to actually make all new links, and it'd just be a major, major pain in the fucking ass to do that. But if you're just joining, all the links are updated with the proper links that should get you into the Hangout. And if it doesn't get you into the Hangout, let me know and I'll get you shared on. So anyway, since nobody else heard this earlier, I'll repeat again that Sovryn Tech will be released later tonight on Sunday, October 28th, 2018. And it's only because we're making the patrons will find out we're making some special stuff for it. And so because of that, it was a little delayed, but it will be done tonight and it will be out tonight. And now when I say tonight, that means probably after a workout and dinner. Okay. Because man's got to eat. So anyway, hopefully everybody gets into the Hangout now, or everybody gets into the YouTube chat at least now. So like I started saying, there's a couple things I guess I want to start off saying, then I'll get into, I do have some preloaded questions and we can get into some other questions as well. Boy, this Star Wars Resistance, I'm enjoying the hell out of it. Like I'm shocked how much I'm enjoying the hell out of it. The major problem with it is that they released the 3 episodes at the beginning of the month, and they were the 3 episodes with the first episode, the premiere, the pilot, and then 2 more episodes that they would just end up replaying over the past couple weeks. And finally today, on this Sunday, they actually released a new episode that we hadn't seen at the beginning of the fucking month. And so it's kind of hard to remember all the characters' names because there hasn't been that consistent week by week kind of viewing of it that I've engaged in. So hopefully I'll get to know all the characters' names much better by the time, before the show, whatever, ends its season 1. But I've really been I'm still amazed at how much I have been laughing out loud while watching it, because it was billed as a kid show. I mean, it really was. And as usually with Star Wars, one of the problems you get is that it tries to be for all demographics, but sometimes it skews, and it almost never skews adult. It always skews towards the kids, and it can kind of fail in that. Like Rebels season 1, not the most engaging. First couple seasons of Clone Wars, not the most engaging. If you're an adult, I can understand that perspective. But with Resistance, I'm just kind of amazed at how quickly I'm kind of sold in and engaged with what's going on, and how much I'm actually laughing at some of the jokes that get dropped in it, because it is a little more of a basic show. So anyway, we'll have our Star Wars update that'll come out. I believe that'll get released on the 30th, the Star Wars update for October. And I'm sure we'll be deep diving into the first 4 episodes of Star Wars Resistance then, along with a lot of other things. So, but I am just, again, if you haven't checked it out yet, do check it out, because, if you think of it as a kid show, I mean, go ahead and think that, and sure, you can tell that it is, but I'm just impressed at how engaging it is and how funny it actually is, even for someone like me, who normally does very, very adult matters. So anyway, now something that you'll hear later tonight when the new Sovryn Tech episode does get released, Sovryn Tech Prime episode does get released. I didn't realize it, but today, October 28th, 2018, is the anniversary of 7 years of me being in New Hampshire. I moved on October 28th, 2011. It was a Saturday night, and it was a snowstorm, a very ugly snowstorm that almost had me not really turning around, but kind of like the thought was, admittedly in my head, I mean, I'm an atheist and all, but it did kind of cross my mind, like, is something trying to tell me not to do this? But obviously, if I didn't do it, I mean, I wouldn't be living. I wouldn't have been able to experience all the amazing things I've been able to experience over the past 7 years. There would be no Sovryn Tech. And I cannot imagine my life without this show and without doing the show. So, I am more than happy that I did not turn around at all in that really horrendous snowstorm. In fact, I remember hearing I put on Free Talk Live that night while I was driving into New Hampshire. And Stephanie was actually hosting that night. And in fact, she almost didn't make it to Free Talk Live that night. And it was quite a thing. But an interesting confluence of events that occurred. But I, of course, am so happy that regardless of, any feelings I've had back and forth with the Free State Project, I am so happy that I moved to New Hampshire. I cannot picture really leaving New Hampshire, not anytime soon anyway. I think New England is really, I mean, the most beautiful place on earth, next to maybe like Belarus or something, but it really is the most beautiful place on earth. So I am, again, just very, 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 very happy that events worked out in that way. And I'll tell you, that October in 2011, that was a tumultuous month for me. I mean, it was pretty crazy. A lot going on. I mean, I was married at the time. I mean, it was just really, someday I may recount more of the personal aspects of that move and of that month and what happened, but that today is not the day to recount that. But it's interesting that it seems like, I don't know. October always seems like a big month for me for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why it shapes up that way, but it does seem to. So anyway, happy 7th anniversary to me. Woo. Maybe I'll have a little party tonight. And well, a party for me is like pizza and Star Trek. That's though something else you'll hear in this week's Sovryn Tech Prime episode when it gets released. I did get the Neo Geo Mini that finally came in, and wow, what a precious little machine that is. I love this thing. It might be my favorite retro console of the bunch. Like, it's the most expensive of the bunch so far. It really is. But I mean, it is so much fun. Like, it's crazy fun. And it's so well done. Like, they put so much thought into it. I was particularly surprised and impressed by, like, you could really, as long as you plug it in with, and it takes a USB-C connector, which I talked about this in a recent Sovryn Tech Prime episode. And folks, feel free to ask questions inside of the YouTube chat if you like, and we can get to those. I do have some preloaded ones that I'm going to get to in a second. But as long as you plug in that USB-C power, like, it's a completely independent machine. It doesn't need a television. It doesn't need speakers. It has a headphone jack on it, but you don't need to put in headphones, but you can. It has its own speakers because it looks like a little arcade cabinet, right? And you can plug in the controllers. I ended up buying an extra because it only comes with one normally, one of the Neo Geo controllers. I ended up buying an extra one. But on it, it has the little joystick. And it's not even just a little joystick. Like, it has a little blue light up ring around it that lights up. And it feels good. All the buttons are there. I mean, everything you could want. It's really a self-contained little system. I kind of wish it had a battery in it, but I think if they ended up putting a lithium battery in it, it would have ended up, I don't know, it probably would have cost another 50, 60, $70. So to keep it at cost, I get why they did that. I don't want to rehash what I talked about on Sovryn Tech Prime that'll be released later tonight, but to keep it at cost, they had to do that. But you could just take, you could take like an Anker portable battery and just plug it in with the USB-C cord, and it works beautifully. And you have a portable system in that way. It's damn. I mean, and it has 40 games on it. It is so much fun. It is so much fucking fun. I started playing Blazing Star on it, and that was great. Played some Metal Slug. I mean, it was wild. I really had a great time playing with that. It is easily the best retro console out there. A little update that you won't hear in the Sovryn Tech Prime episode, but the handheld Atari 2600, I think I mentioned it on a Patreon episode. I mentioned it somewhere, or maybe it was in a Game Talk, one of our new Game Talk series. But the handheld where it's like the wood and it looks like a mini Atari 2600, but it's like a Game Boy. Those you can now actually get shipped to the United States. I don't know what the fuck took so long. You still have to order it from sites in the UK, but you can get them shipped to the United States now. I'm honestly not going for it. Like, this is, first off, Atari. Understand this. There is no like Atari company anymore. You more or less just license the Atari brand, and that's it. Like, there's no real Atari out there. And so with that in mind, I mean, the mini, the handheld Atari 2600 has 50 games on it, and there's some pretty major games missing from that selection. But honestly, like, I have all of the really great, and these are probably the best collections out there. There have been Atari retro collections for other consoles that have come out over the years, many times over. Like you had the original, was it like the 25th anniversary collection, or Atari Redux or whatever, or Redo, that came out for the PlayStation 1 back in the day. That was a great collection. I mean, I have so many different Atari collections, but my favorites, the best ones, I think, are actually the 2-volume set, as well as the retro Atari collection that came out for the Nintendo DS, not Nintendo 3DS, but the Nintendo DS. Of course, you can play it in a 3DS, which I do. You get so many games with that. Like, it's pointless to buy, in my opinion, with those out there. It's really pointless to buy any other like rehash of the Atari system. And Stella works so great. The Atari emulator, like, that genuinely works so great, unless you got a really high end Atari rebuild. I can't picture buying a retro console. Like, Hyperkin sells a really high end that takes cartridges, not emulators. It's not an emulator, but I mean, well, it uses emulation software, but it takes cartridges. Like, I understand buying that, but unless there was some really like super, like Analog, if Analog came out with a rehash or with their own version of the Atari 2600 console, I'd probably get that, but it's got to be something so special. And just what this company, I forget the name of the company that's even putting it out. Again, they're not really Atari. What this company's putting out, it looks great, and the reviews are pretty good. Just, it's not enough for me to, not just appreciate the collection that I have for my 3DS. Like with the Intellivision, I'm excited about the new Intellivision that's going to be coming out in, I think now it's 2020. But it's because they're going to offer more for it, kind of like with the Commodore 64. Like, you can do more, you can put in more games. I don't know if I would have gotten the Commodore 64 Mini if it didn't have the ability to expand and add in more games to it. That's real, and new games, like games by Cytronic Software, like I talked about in the Game Talk recently in my review of the Commodore 64 or the C64 Mini, was how you could add in like Organism, which is a new Commodore game, and it's brilliant. So the new Intellivision is going to have all that. So I'm sold, but otherwise I have Intellivision lives I have it for my Nintendo DS. I have an Intellivision collection for my PlayStation 2. Like, it's good enough. There's so many games available for that. There's really no point. So like with the Atari, you've got to do something special. By the way, another bit of news, Analog, most of you have probably heard this, Analog, they made the Nintendo, that NES, really high end, like full metal console. And they made the Analog Super NT, the Super Nintendo, a new console. They're going to come out with a Genesis one that's going to play like Master System games as well. I will be all over that. I am so excited for that. So, you got it, but that's the thing, is you got to come out with something really special to really get me to want to get it outside of what's already available. I mean, with the Nintendo, like there's the look and there's a lot of other aspects around that. With the Neo Geo, SNK, I already told you, SNK did such a beautiful job with that. Like, how could you not want it? It's easily the best mini console out there so far. Maybe Sega will take top spot with that. Maybe Sony's PlayStation Classic will be something interesting in that regard. Of course, you have to wait another month for that to come out, and we still don't know what games are coming out for it. Not all of them, anyway. But right now, the Neo Geo Mini is easily taking top spot as far as that goes. Until Retro Games Limited, the company that released the C64 Mini, until they release a full-size Commodore 64, which they supposedly are planning on doing. Yeah, I got to give it to the Neo Geo Minis as far as being the best retro console out there right now. Let's see what's going on in the YouTube chat. Let's see. I never saw a Neo Geo in person. It was a mythological console that only existed in Electronic Gaming Monthly, or EGM, as he said, which was one of the best, if not the best, gaming magazine out there back in the day. And then let's see. Then there's I didn't know anyone who had one either. It was the most expensive console at the time. It really, really was. So yeah, just to comment on that, that's one of the amazing things. And anybody I have play the Neo Geo Mini with me, I explain to them, with 40 games in it, with 2 controllers and the Neo Geo, like I tell them, you're playing pretty much a $10,000 system, like with all the, considering the price of the games, controller, the whole thing, the whole package, even though it only costs like $110 or something like that. You are literally playing, you're playing with $10,000 on your tabletop when you're messing with the system. And I think that that's important to keep in mind, because let's be clear here, because it is an arcade emulator, a lot of these games are very short, especially, I mean, like Blazing Star, very short game. A lot of them have a lot of replay value because they're 2-player and, they're competitive, your Samurai Showdowns and so on. But yeah, I mean, you're messing around with $10,000. So like the asking price, even though it's the most expensive of the retro consoles, is not outlandish at all for what you're really getting. It's pretty amazing. Someone else here in the YouTube chat, did you see the new arcade cabinets and Walmart and other places? No, I don't think I have. I'll look into that. Admittedly, I don't go into a whole lot of retail stores. I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. But I will look into this. And if it's like the mini ones, I know that there's been that line and they're like 20, I forget how much they are, $20-$40 pop, something like that, where like it's a mini little arcade cabinet that you can actually play Pac-Man on and whatever. Those look pretty slick. Especially like a Pac-Man one, I would be intrigued by. But anyway, no, I haven't seen those yet. I will, but I will look into that. Let's see. You have all those flashback consoles too. Yeah. With the Atari, there have been retro consoles of Ataris, of the Atari 2600 and so on, for long before Nintendo made it a thing, made it like popular. And let's see, I think he's talking about the arcade 1-up. Okay, I am going, because the audio, I already kind of flubbed the audio earlier by sending everybody the wrong link. I am going to do a little Ecosia search here to see what we're talking about with the arcade 1-up. And it is taking a second to load. Are these full size? Bring the arcade classic. Oh, 3/4 scale. Okay, well that makes sense because they didn't need to be as big as they fucking were anyway. Wow, these are pretty fucking incredible. We got a great selection here. They're multi-game cabinets. So you got like Asteroids that comes with, looks like Lunar Lander, and then you have one, Rampage, Gauntlet, Joust, and Defender. That's the one to get. As far as, Centipede, Missile Command, Crystal Castles. Oh dear. I might end up, they have them at Walmart. I might end up buying some of these. This is they're $300 a pop. Okay, well, I'm not buying one of them right now, but fuck, good looking out, because those look mighty impressive. I am intrigued by that. So let's see. And then we've got let's see, I've been told not to get the Asteroids version 1-up because the wheel controller is bad. Yeah, that's the thing, like with Centipede and Asteroids and so on, like they used to have those ball controllers. That's a pretty fine machine, or fine bit of controlling. And also, like, I remember my hands would constantly get pinched in those. You can't really make those cheap. Like those kinds of controls, are going to get beaten up and beaten up hard. So there's no way to do those wrong. Like you're pretty much putting like a cue ball, from a game of pool inside like an arcade cabinet, and you absolutely cannot do that wrong. Like you have no choice. Yeah, let's see. Thanks for that, Rob. I was about to pull the trigger on one and was having a hard time choosing. Yeah, I would. Boy, the best looking one for me is the Rampage Gauntlet Joust and Defender. Like Defender it's not Defender Stargate. I wish it was that, but that's a great selection. The one with Street Fighter on it, I don't know if I'd go there, because the collections that you can get, like the 30th anniversary Street Fighter collection that you can get for just about every console out there, and you can get great arcade sticks, for home. That's really the way to go with that. But doing Defender with a full-on stick and everything, and Rampage and Gauntlet, yeah, that's very attractive. That's probably the most attractive one, I think, on the in that lineup. So thanks for the heads up on that. I did have a preloaded question, but the person that actually sent me the question is in the Hangout. So if Daniel wants to, I don't know if he's just hanging out or if he wants to jump in and do some audio.
Okay, what's going on?
Rocking the Hangouts.
Rocking the Hangouts, yeah. Yeah, I was actually sorry I'm late. I was actually wondering whether you covered my my question yet, but
not yet.
So you mentioned the death of PGP in a previous. Can't remember if it was a Prime or
it was
Q&A.
A Patreon. Yeah, it was a Q&A. Yeah.
And gosh, you do so many of them.
Yeah, I know.
Who the hell keeps track? So you mentioned the death of PGP, and you were and along those lines, I don't remember exactly what it was that triggered the thought in me, but it was along the lines of like let's find something that makes it easy to do encryption. Let's find something that basically get security done right. And I remember you'd mentioned Steve Gibson's Squirrel project a while back.
Yeah.
And when I saw it at first, I was probably just as amazed as you were by the sort of the idea of it. And actually, in all fairness, now that I think about it, it kind of reminds me of MateSafe in a way, of like the way you log it, at least the original idea. I don't know what MateSafe is up to these days, but the original idea of basically logging into to websites through your with public key, private key sort of methods, and each website log on for those, basically at a very high level, for those who don't know what Squirrel is, it's basically, instead of you having a username and password and relying on the website to store the passwords in their database, even if they're salted, or even if there's an encrypted way to store the passwords, you're still relying on the database to have the username and password for you, as opposed to having a method whereby you have a username, you have a way of authenticating that is you through the use of private key that you sign a challenge or whatever. And the challenge is dependent not just upon your username, but also upon the domain that you're logging into. So it's not really something that you can, even if you do manage to break the challenge, it doesn't break it for everything. So anyway, bottom line is that it's a pretty awesome tool, and if only it were more widely used, then you won't have to have 25 different usernames and passwords. You'd have just one. You'd have your personal sort of public key and your private key. You'd have the tool Squirrel that basically uses it to log on. You can even do it with your phone with a QR code, what have you, and you can actually have something that is thoroughly secure and won't be hacked, or a high reasonableness that it won't be hacked. You can never have nothing that won't be hacked. And it's been around, and it's been sort of, I would say, production ready from what I gathered for a year, and nothing has moved. Like, nobody even knows about it. My first question was, as someone who follows Steve Gibson's work, like, has he mentioned anything? Like, do you know why the thing hasn't taken off? And the second part of the question is, seeing as how similar this is to like a MetaMask or some kind of authentication tool, Scatter for those who are into EOS, or MetaMask for those who are into Ethereum. These kind of authentication layers that are there to help you interact with blockchain-based distributed applications, that instead of you putting your private key into the dApp, you're basically keeping the private key client side and you're just sort of authenticating yourself. I guess the second question is, with the more prevalence of dApps and blockchain type stuff getting into the mainstream, do you see something like Squirrel catching on? Maybe it's not exactly Squirrel, maybe it's like a MetaMask or a Scatter equivalent, but do you see something like that catching on, and maybe username and passwords, even if it's not Steve Gibson's approach, username and passwords days are numbered?
Yeah, well, definitely username and passwords are going to go the way of the dodo. Like, that's happening, and Silicon Valley, the tech giants themselves seem to be very much in support of that, except for maybe Facebook. But to answer your first question on that, so it's been like ready and hammered for about the past year, Squirrel, and that's SQRL for those that want to look it up, or go to grc.com and you can read more about it. But it hasn't, like, there hasn't been like the finished GUI or UI and everything. That is just now coming to fruition. So there hasn't exactly two things. One is that there really hasn't been the ability for any company to latch onto it yet, because like its initial form wasn't finalized until recently. But we're in, as far as I understand it with Steve Gibson, we're literally in like the final stages, to the point where he's going to do the full show, a full episode of Security Now, which is his podcast, where he shows you, they go line by line of this is how you do it. So it's not so much surprising that anyone else hasn't jumped on it. However, one company in particular, and I think Steve Gibson, he was kind of showing his hand, and this was in the past month. I forget which episode it was, but they were talking about Google's Titan Key, which is their version of the YubiKey of two-factor authentication using a hardware device that does the same thing, where, kind of answers an AES challenge. When they were talking about that, I think it was Leo asked him, or maybe it was someone else, maybe it was Jason Howell who's guest hosting. Asked Steve Gibson, are you concerned about YubiKey's future? Because he's a big fan of YubiKey, as am I, as the company itself, not just the technology. And Steve Gibson said, he's like, oh no, I think YubiKey is going to be just fine. And the way that he said it, it was also within the context of talking about Squirrel. And so I think Yubico, the company that makes YubiKeys, Yubico is going to actually produce perhaps some kind of either the hardware, because it could be done with a smartphone, like you said, Daniel, where you could do the QR code handshake, where you don't need a password. You're literally just scanning a QR code that a website will bring up for you to allow you to log into the website. I think that Yubico is going to be very much a hardware partner as far as Squirrel goes. And that's an important thing to understand about Squirrel, is that, like, why wasn't this done before? Why wasn't, the technology you described, why didn't exactly they do this before? Part of it is because, and this will also answer your second question, part of it is because it's only in the past 10 years that we've gotten to the point where the idea of people holding what are effectively two computers, let's say a desktop laptop and a smartphone. Okay. It's only up until now that that's actually been a thing. And so because it's commonplace for people to have a second device, now you can actually engage in this kind of security. You can actually come up with this kind of idea. Now, it doesn't necessarily require that, but that's what makes it really practical, is the fact that now everybody has a smartphone, and so everybody can literally do the second device authentication, and they can do this handshake, say, between QR codes or whatever. I think it's also a major part. Well, it's something that's allowed for a lot of second factor authentication options to really come into existence, is this idea that people have, two devices. To answer the second part, as far as that goes, that's also why I think that passwords will effectively go the way of the dodo. Username and passwords were, I don't want to say necessary, but for lack of a better term, they were necessary at a time where, in fact, I was just thinking about this earlier today. I don't remember why I was thinking about it, I know what it was. I was installing software, and it said it was on a Windows machine, and it was asking me, do you want to install this for everybody on this computer, or just this one username, or, just this one user? And I thought about it, and I looked at that screen for a second, and I was like, that's so goddamn funny. Like, that used to be such a big deal for people. in general to, how to put this, it used to be a thing that they would like that a computer would have multiple users, and like on Windows, you know, the Windows logon screen would have multiple names or pictures, like on Windows Vista or something, that wherever, or even on XP had that, where you could like click on it and then you'd put in your password and you log into the machine. Because it used to be commonplace, not that we had two devices, it wasn't even commonplace that everybody owned a computer. It's where now it feels like everybody literally owns their own laptop, right? You know, even your kids. And with that in mind, you know what, like I was thinking about that, and that's the kind of world that needs username and passwords, where people are sharing one device, you know. Now, ironically, Squirrel could work very well for that world as long as everybody has a second device and the other one device is something that's shared. It would actually work brilliantly for that, for like an operating system login. I think that's a great way to go with Squirrel. But that said, you know, I mean, like we didn't get to that world until now. So in fact, some of this might come up on the Sovryn Tech Prime episode that's getting released later tonight, because there's a point where I talk about the HTC Exodus 1, which is kind of like the first blockchain phone. And you know, all of that this future where we all seem to have two devices, or at the very least we have access to two devices, is what allows Squirrel to become a thing. It's what allows for you know, this kind of authentication and this kind of security to actually work and be more practical. I mean, it's funny, years ago, because this has been getting worked on, I think, by Steve Gibson for like about 4 years now. It's funny because years ago, like, he had like kind of a Doc Brown moment from Back to the Future. He's like, holy shit, you know, what happened? Like, how did I not think of this before? And he didn't like, I want to like kind of empathize with him and say, well, you didn't think of it before because the world that would have allowed for it didn't exactly didn't really exist, like where we could actually, you know, take advantage of things like QR codes and other things. I mean, and that's true for blockchain technology, or cryptocurrency, I should say, not just blockchain, but cryptocurrency in general is only really possible because of the idea that everybody has a camera in their pocket, right? And that QR codes are an easy way for people to communicate and send things. Yeah, so the technology where it's at now has allowed for this new level of security. I mean, and not that we needed smartphones to do this, because and I've brought this up many times. Was it 2011 or 2007? Maybe it's 2011 when I started talking about it, but I forget. But IBM came up with Identity Mixer, which was the idea that you would have, or one of the possible implementations of Identity Mixer is that you had a separate device that held your, you know, identifying information. Of course, it all be encrypted. And when you were asked for the identifying information at any given point, it would only give what was absolutely necessary to fit within the range of what you want. Like, range being like if you needed to be 18 or older to look at something, it would just verify that you were 18 and older, but that's all the information it would send. It would not give you your name. It would not give anything else. It only gave the information that was necessary. But that, again, that kind of stuff is only really possible in a world where, you know, we're really in a world where you have multiple devices. So that's kind of the very difference that's the difference that we're dealing with today. As far as why hasn't this stuff been implemented yet, we're just getting used to the fact that people have multiple computers effectively. And when I say computers, I include smartphones in that. So let's see. Let's look at the YouTube chat here. So I know Daniel had to drop, so go do your thing, baby. I understand. All right, let's see. I was thinking Squirrel was never going to come out. He's been saying it's almost done for quite a while. Yeah, I agree. This has been, I think he's been working on it for almost 4 years, Steve Gibson. But the language that I'm hearing from him now is that we're like that close, you know, and if you're not watching the video, you can't see my fingers, but we're that close to releasing or, you know, to where they're going to do the episode where they actually show it off. So it's going to be out there. It's going to happen. I do think so. I was getting worried that it wouldn't happen either. Like Daniel mentioned MadeSafe, and it's like, yeah, where the hell's MadeSafe? You know, we've been waiting years for that. And I know I get shit every time I say that, because then there's people who come on. It's like, well, you know, you're not keeping up with what they're doing. They're doing things. And I get it that it takes time. Well, when it's out, it's out, and I'll be happy to have David Irvine. He and I have a great rapport. I'd be happy to have him on when there's something out there that people can really log into. I mean, like really log into and use, and it's actually doing the stuff, and it's not using DigitalOcean or not DigitalOcean. Yeah, whatever. It's not using droplets or something, for it to work. Let's see, in the YouTube chat, when it does come out, referencing Squirrel, I don't think it will catch on very quickly. Username/password seems like a very sticky concept that will be hard to replace. Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, at least the tech giants are they're really getting on board with FIDO2. They're really getting on board with YubiKeys and everything now. They're starting to take it seriously. I mean, when Google's releasing its own 2FA keys, literal physical hardware, I think that's a sign of the times. People know that this is a problem. And Facebook, honestly, who, like I said, is the one that's lagging, they would do well to get on with this, because they need to do something to, I mean, it's not going to solve the kind of data leaks that they have. And they're not even leaks. They're often intentional. So it's not really a leak. But they would do well to get on board with this stuff, to, if anything, to have the illusion of security theater. Even though this is genuine security, but to give people some kind of confidence in what they're doing. So anyway, okay. So yeah, great question about that. Was actually the preloaded question that I had, was about Squirrel and all that. I agree. Also, though, it is going to take time for that to get, for people to start jumping on board with that. But I think the little services out there will jump on with it very quickly. For example, I use Fastmail a lot. In fact, there's now actually a patron recommended this. There's now an affiliate link for Fastmail that I've created, that if you want to use it, you get like 10% off or something. And, I get a little bit of a cut on all of that. And it's fastmail.sovryntech.com. And you'll hear it at the beginning of the Sovryn Tech Prime episode, where I'm talking about it's important that we really do pay for everything. But Fastmail, in no time, they had FIDO2 set up. In no time, they get all the latest security stuff and everything implemented, because they're a small company and they can implement that into their code base so quickly. So I think a lot of the, one of the important things that we can do when Squirrel does come out is find out, and I'm sure Steve Gibson's going to have a registry of all the sites and services that use it. Find out who those are and frequent them, and say, and give them the market signal that says, hey, you're using Squirrel. Thank you. And these kind of features will, can effectively, help start to replace things like PGP and so on, even though, like I said, really, as long as there's going to be email, PGP is going to be around and going to be, and I do think it'll be actively developed. And, something to keep in mind that I didn't bring up in that Q&A about the PGP, and its ultimate fate, is keep in mind that, so there was open PGP that wasn't being the guy, there was one developer that was working on it pretty much. And he had no money, and it was a really bad situation. And then Facebook jumped in and gave however many thousands upon thousands of dollars, donated to making sure that this guy was actively developing and everything. Look, they did that out of self-preservation, because we got that Instagram picture, that famous Instagram picture that we analyzed years ago on Sovryn Tech, where we saw Mark Zuckerberg's MacBook, and we saw the software that he had on there. And oh yeah, he was using PGP. I mean, he was doing it right, other than he was using Google Chrome, which I thought was weird. But at the time, granted, Mozilla's code base with Firefox wasn't as slick as it is now. But regardless of that, when the tech giants use this, don't, with all due respect to Matthew Green, don't listen to Matthew Green saying PGP is dead. Sorry, if you have one of the richest guys on the planet using it, and also now funding it, you should be paying attention to that. Okay. So anyway, so feel free, again, also, into the YouTube chat, go ahead and get in any other questions that you want. And I will get into those. That was really the only preloaded question that I had set, because I had the flub with the Patreon links that I sent out before the show went out. I'll run this a little bit past 5:00. Usually it only runs till 5:00, and right now it's 4:45. So let's see. Will we be getting the next Sovereign Universe audio drama soon? I'll go ahead and tell you. I mean, the patrons, you'll get a little surprise with episode 299C that comes out today. There will be a surprise with that. If you're wondering about the audio drama, as far as like the dramatizations of the short stories that I've done, those will be coming soon. There will be more of those coming soon as well. But yeah, tonight you'll get a little bit of a surprise, and then we'll see what what spawn comes from that. So I'll tell you that much, and I'm not going to go any further, but it's also the same reason that the Sovryn Tech Prime episode was not released on Saturday this week. So I have moments where I get tempted to, because in the past, well, over a year, but because in the past year, my weekdays have become so busy. Like there's a part of me that wants to move Sovryn Tech Prime episodes to Sunday, because then Saturday I would have all day. First off, I'd be able to relax for a little while. Second off, I'd have all day to prep more for, the show. So I'm kind of tempted to maybe even change the release to Sunday. Originally, Sovryn Tech came out on Fridays. People don't realize or may not remember that. But then it moved onto Saturday. But I might even move it to Sunday. Just so that there could be like a more regular, it might allow for a more regular release schedule with the present schedule that I have, business schedule that I have throughout the week. So that's something that might be coming, but I'll certainly let people know ahead of time as far as that change, because there's been this year in 2018, there's been 3 or 4, maybe even more than that, times where I had to release Sovryn Tech on a Sunday instead of a Saturday. So it doesn't seem to have hurt anything. Listener numbers don't seem to hurt as far as that goes. But that, that's what's out there. So anyway, as far as other things to talk about, what's been hot and happening, this is kind of strange for me, because like I want to talk about, maybe some things I haven't on Sovryn Tech Prime episode, but I haven't released it yet. So that's kind of a new deal for me. Yeah, we were talking about, gaming and those arcade machines. Those are really those arcade 1UP machines, and it's arcade 1UP, the number one, arcade1up.com. I appreciate those being brought up. I think I'd heard about these, but I didn't know that they're out there available, and certainly that they're in stores. I didn't know about that. I'm pretty intrigued by this. I mean, like, I'm thinking about it more, and I'm just kind of like, I mean, it sort of defeats the purpose of the mini consoles. Like, I think that there's an attraction to the mini consoles because they are just that. They are mini. And if I were going to go, like, for $300, you can get a res. Again, it's not the same thing. You're not getting the beautiful, like, cabinet work that these clearly have, and they really do. They're gorgeous looking little machines. I got to admit, I'm sort of, let's see. Yeah, as long as, let's see, I'm fine with Sunday as long as it comes out. I really don't mind which day, referencing the release of Sovryn Tech. Yeah, well, you always get a new one every week. That hasn't failed for, going on 7 years now. But anyway, so, you don't get the pretty cabinet artwork, and there's something to be said. Part of the appeal of these mini consoles is that, you look at your television or underneath your television, and holy shit, there's like a mini Super Nintendo, or there's a mini NES, or NES, I should say. Or there's a mini whatever, mini Commodore 64, there's a mini Neo Geo, and so on. That's part of the attraction to this. And I could understand where that would also add on to the attraction of, well, there's a 3/4 size arcade cabinet that I could stand right in front of, or put a chair in front of, and rock and roll, and have a great time. So I can really understand that. But this is one where it does feel a little more, and in fact, what's really highlighted this for me is in fact, there's an interesting subject really to bring up around this, that would make for a great game talk conversation, but I'll talk about I'll talk about it here. So arcade games, what I noticed when playing the Neo Geo Mini is that arcade games are very, like, they're designed to be short. They're short, but ridiculously hard. So you keep putting quarters in, right? But also, if you're willing to keep putting in the quarters, they want you to beat it while you're at the arcade. So because with that in mind, like these mini are now if it's a competitive game where it's, you versus someone else, that has more infinite replay value, right? But a lot of these arcade games, even if they are where either co-op or even somewhat competitive, they have story modes and stuff like this, but they're always very, very short. And we're going to get to someone just joined the Hangout. We'll get to them in a second. I feel like this is a case where laying down the money, especially $300, might be a little steep. Thinking about it, and because for $300 you could set up a retro, you could set up a Raspberry Pi, you could get yourself a very nice monitor, and you could get some very inexpensive full on like arcade stick controllers, plug all that in, and like build a very basic stand for this that almost looks like an arcade cabinet. You could probably do that for under $300, and you could play every arcade game ever made, or just about every arcade game ever made. So this is getting into the realm of where I like the retro aspects of it, and there's something cool for it. And if like you're really invested in the house that you're in, it can certainly make sense. But this is where it seems to be like, I don't know if I'm ready to go down this road, and where the price of admission isn't so justified as it is with the mini consoles. One of the nice things about the mini consoles is that like whenever we're going to a hotel or something, I put them in a hard case and I can bring the mini consoles, and you can plug them in through the HDMI, right into the hotel TV. And finally, those hotel TVs actually do something for me, because otherwise I'd always just make fun of them saying like, what the hell is that antique device doing in front of me? And you lose that with these cabinets. So I don't know. This is an interesting thing. I'm going to chew on it more, because I just found out about them, or at least that they're real. And I'll report back on that, but I really appreciate it coming up. So then we got one more comment in the YouTube chat. Then we actually got Rob, my co-host Rob, who's going to be joining me here on the Hangout. But let's see. I saw a regular sized NES for the first time in a while the other day. Forgot how damn big it was with my mini sitting on my desk all this time. Yeah, those things are big. Yeah, I mean, the big gray box. In fact, I always had the dream, and I know people have actually done it. Like, I wanted to put a mini ITX Intel board like inside one of those, and like actually just have it be my desktop computer. But now we're kind of past desktop computers in a real way, so I don't know that I do that, but it's certainly still possible. So anyway, all right, let's get to it. We got Rob. Man, how we doing?
Hey, man. Doing good. How are you doing?
Doing all right. So yeah, I flubbed with the links earlier. I'm glad you guys messaged me on Patreon and just sort of like, hey, the links are for September. I'm like, oh, fucking A. So,
yeah, I should have checked it earlier. I saw the clock and I'm like, oh, it's a few minutes till the time.
Yeah.
I clicked on a link. I was like, oh no, I'm gonna miss it. And, yeah.
I didn't say anything important anyway at the beginning. So, but go for it. What do you got, man?
Well, I was actually just going to hit on all the points you hit with the arcade 1-up, and that I really don't think it's worth the price, because really what you're paying for there is the cabinet. The rest of the hardware on the inside is really cheap stuff. I've watched at least 3 or 4 reviews on the thing, and like I said, the one with the asteroid cabinets, it has the rotating wheel, not the ball.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
For like Tempest and asteroids.
Yep.
The thing, like, it clicks. It doesn't spin freely. So it's a lot of people are complaining about it, and the company, like, so a company sent somebody like an early copy, like not a prototype, but an early production model.
Mm-hmm.
And they said they were going to fix it. And then I watched more reviews of the actual retail versions that people bought in stores, and it still has the same problem. So I don't know that I even necessarily trust the company to fix this problem in the future.
Yeah. So, funny thing you bring that up. So 2 points. One is that, yes. And not just like the centipede ball, like I was describing, that's like a cue ball. A lot of arcade. So in New Hampshire, we're fortunate to have like what is one of the largest arcades in the world. We have Fun Spot in Laconia, and it's specifically more a classic arcade where they have like a ton of the old games and everything. And people like, I grew up with arcade cabinets because my dad actually repaired them for the local skating rink. And so he had to bring them home, put them in the garage, and I'd have like 20 arcade, full on arcade cabinets of, Battlezone, Defender Stargate, Frogger,
Wow.
You kind of go down the list. I had all of them in my garage. And of course, my dad, who, after he'd repair them, he's like, all right, Brian, we got to make sure these things fucking work. And so he just set me loose, inside there. No quarters. You just flick the little, the little wire when you have the actual front quarter machine opened up. And, I play those forever. So not everybody has that experience that I do, or, maybe they're not as old as I am, even though I'm not that old. But bottom line being, people don't realize like how fucking rock solid the joysticks, the whatever, like the wheel control that you're mentioning. I mean, that like I can still feel it in my hand, even though I haven't touched one in forever. But you could go to arcades like Fun Spot and do so yourself. Where like, I mean, it was like a heavy fucking metal thing. I mean, it was real.
Yeah, and it felt like it was on ball bearings too,
right?
So it would, like, spin really nice and smooth.
Yeah. I mean, and there's a reason that, you can have an arcade like Fun Spot with these machines because they'll last forever the way that they were fucking built. I mean, it's just, It was amazing.
Yeah. So that's the thing with the price on these is it's just, like I said, if you're just paying for the cabinet, I would go out and buy like an old arcade cabinet of a machine that's not even working.
Right.
And do it the right way and have a full size one. Cause these are like, I think they're like 3/4.
Yeah,
size.
3/4. Yeah.
And like they even like they sell an additional stand for like a ridiculous amount of money just to raise it up a little bit higher. It's just
where you don't need a chair.
Yeah. It's just a waste of money. So it's just like I said, like that is my personal plan, is just to go out and eventually get a cabinet. And I also have I'm looking for a PVM monitor.
Right.
That I can install this because I bought a add-on board for the Retro Pry a little while ago that allows me to use BNC connectors.
Oh, okay.
Which is
yeah.
RGB on a PVM. So just get, the highest CRT quality you can get.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And, honestly, even if somebody wants to sit down in front of the arcade machine and not stand up like was the tradition in the 80s, there's plenty of classic arcade games. Not Tempest. Was it Time Tunnel? Was a full cabinet that you could get, and that had a full, actually very comfortable seat that you could sit in front of it. And so get a cabinet like that if you still want to actually sit in front of it.
Yeah.
And just replace everything and put your multi arcade machine in there and away you go.
Well, that was the other thing too. Is like for sit down games, I actually prefer those bar top units. Well, not bar top, but they were kind of like countertop. Yeah. Where the screen was flat, and you could rest your drinks on it and stuff. And they were usually found them in bars and stuff. But those are really cool. Yeah,
exactly. No, I agree with that completely. So, yeah. Now the second point I want to bring up. Your idea is brilliant. So, and I think that's definitely the way to go. But the second point I want to bring up is this idea of like early reviews for particularly with a lot of these retro consoles that are coming out, or even these arcade machines. I can't remember. I don't think it was for an Atari thing. I think it was for like a Namco museum, effectively, just Namco games on it. And that Bandai was like licensing out or something. This company, and in fact, I just saw, it wasn't Retro, or Nostalgia Nerd. I don't think it was Nostalgia Nerd that did it, but somebody was reviewing one of these newer retro consoles, and I think it was all Namco games. And yeah, it had to be because they were arcade emulated versions of them. And it was like, they got it a couple months back. They got the kind of the press version of it. And the guy loved it. The guy said it was absolutely amazing. And in fact, it was like full on, it was better than what you were getting with a lot of other re-releases, even like software re-releases of these, because you were getting the full on arcade versions of these games, Pac-Man, whatever else. And it was just really, really well done. But he said then when the official version came out, you actually ended up with Nintendo versions, NES versions of these games. They weren't the arcade games anymore. And like everything about it was just lower quality. And so he did this review to get everybody excited, to buy it when it'd come out, a couple months later or whatever. And then it ended up being a total flub when it finally came out. And he had to do a re-review and just say, look, like what they ended up releasing was shit. And so it's very tough to like even count on a lot of these early, reviews of some of these things, because what you would get in the end, either A, like you said, it doesn't fix the problem that they talked about. Which actually I mentioned, I think, in my C64 mini review, because I was hoping that they'd fix the joystick that people were complaining about in the European version of it, and they didn't end up fixing it. But I mean, you have that problem, but then also like what you end up getting, what ends up on the shelf, Walmart or whatever, could be a piece of shit compared to what was reviewed in the first place. So yeah, we live in a funny world.
Yeah.
And I mean, all of it, honestly, like most of these problems all come down to intellectual property, of course. Like the licensing for all of these things and everything, is really where somebody can't create some kind of cottage industry version of all this, like a Hyperkin or some company like that, and just release like the best fucking versions of, or like a real, arcade cabinet, that could do the real deal. Instead, most of the money has to go to licensing. In fact, I'd almost argue that the $300 price tag on the arcade one-ups is probably paying for licensing. At least $150 of that is doing so, because plywood doesn't cost that much. And even back in the day, that's half the time what the cabinet was made of.
Right.
Even though the controls were really high end at the time. So and
I'm sure with like, and I can almost guarantee that a lot of the electronics of these things are just being produced by some of these engineering outfits out in China that are just they're the same people that are producing the off-brand or the no brand name products. They're just to get them out on to the market as quickly as possible. So they're not even engineered for quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it raises a great point. Like you've got it, especially with this, it speaks to how games are art. Okay. And you have to respect the art to be able to really do this right. It's got to be passion. This is not something you can just put out as like, it's not smartphones where that kind of business model in China, can kind of work. This is something that has to be done by people that are just super, super passionate about it. It has to be kind of limited in how it's done. I know, Nintendo does engage, I think, in some artificial scarcity tactics.
Oh, definitely.
To put it kindly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's obvious how much passion they have for their own properties.
Right.
And despite any other ugly business practices, especially that have to do with intellectual property that they engage in, they really give a shit, and they're really, really passionate about that stuff. And it shows when they finally get it. But Nintendo's that rare company that is at the size that it is, but also acts like a family company, acts like a cottage company, like very small scale, even though it's not.
Well, that's not uncommon with Japanese companies too.
True.
I mean,
it's very true.
There's a lot of very traditionalist people up at the very top, and they still have that mindset, and that can sometimes be a benefit or a detriment. And I'm thinking of like Konami here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. Yeah. That can get,
that gets ugly.
Because I mean, that's an interesting thing. And that has a lot to do with Japanese culture as well, where, like concepts of lifetime jobs, but really concepts of family, are such a huge deal there. They're such a big deal. I mean, it's going away with, up and coming generations.
Exactly. I was just going to say that.
Yeah. But it's still such a part of business and everything there. The thing is that because of that, like Konami and so on, you get some really, you don't exactly know what happens, but there's some very ugly things with Hideo Kojima and some others, where some very strange things occur that you don't understand. It's like, wait a minute, why would you get rid of this guy? And it's like, well, okay, I know it doesn't make sense on a business, on making money, on profit, but in Japan, it ain't all about profit. Over there, you've got this really weird family model of everything.
Right.
And so something ugly occurs, right? That we never really get a full on answer about because there's such a polite species there.
And I think fortunately, it's going to take that generation of people that are, at the top of the corporate chain to retire before you see a change in attitude about that. Because like you said, it is changing among the younger generations,
right?
But they're nowhere near close to being able to take over yet.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a great point to bring up. But we do have, again, I was glad to hear that Sega, they delayed their mini console was supposed to be out. But they delayed it because I think they're originally going to go with At Games, which is exactly one of these, Chinese production companies that you mentioned, where they just don't have the passion and it's just they just push it out there and it's done.
Right.
But if they're wanting to guarantee that it gets done right, I mean that's great. And again, there are the companies to work with. I think they did a licensing deal with Retrobit, Retrobit's a great company as far as this stuff goes, where they just released controllers. Maybe they're going to work with Retrobit to see about doing a console, which I think they could, because they've already released consoles that are okay. They're not like analog Super NT level kind of consoles, but they're okay. Or deal with Hyperkin. I mean, there's companies that they can deal with. But I think I've brought this up in, I don't know if it was in Game Talks or whatever, wherever I brought it up. I am worried about the future of gaming because, because of the way games are made today, like these little cottage game companies that come out with the most incredible shit in the world, even these arcade one-ups, that's not going to exist forever. Not with games that people are playing today. So
well, I'm kind of concerned, even just in the near future with these retro consoles. Are they going to, start producing them to the point where they're totally closed systems? Like, at least with the Nintendo retro consoles, you can go in there and essentially hack them and add more games.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if in the future Nintendo or other companies going to look at those and say, we don't want our customers to be able to do this, and they're going to close them off. That's what I'm really worried about in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, they'll either close them off or instead they'll just stick with the subscription model where, like, well, in one sense, I get the value. I understand Nintendo Switch Online and how that's working, and that they're actually releasing like quote unquote superior versions of these games, or at least versions of their classic NES titles, Zelda and so on, with new features that they never had before, and some of them are pretty interesting. I still, a part of me really still feels, and especially the more I think about it, the slap to the face that not having a proper virtual console on the Switch is, like, the fact that I can't just buy these games again, even though I've bought them, I don't know how many times over, I have them all on my 3DS anyway, but so it's, either they're going to close them off, which I mean, the reason that you're able to add games if you tinker enough is because they're just Linux machines. They're just little Linux machines out there. Now that they know, go ahead.
Exactly, because they're single purpose, computer boards, and I think I recall there's like little or no difference between the SNES Classic and the NES Classic. It's the same machine on the inside. Yeah, it's only the plastic exterior that changed.
Yeah. As I understand it, the board that's in there could run pretty much up to the Wii, as far as games. That's my understanding of it. Yeah. So, part of that's part of why that's possible. But then I don't think Nintendo expected, like, they did artificial scarcity with the NES Classic when it came out. Right. But I don't think they expected it to be that hot. And so they really were cutting corners in every way they could. So
I think it's a combination of two factors. I think that they didn't expect it to be this popular, and it was going to take them time to ramp up production on those again. Yeah. But I think they kind of took advantage of that situation to say, well, we do have artificial scarcity now, so we're gonna hype it up a little. So I don't think it was an intentional thing to do, create some sort of artificial scarcity, but certainly when it happened, they took full advantage of it.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about that. But also, like, now that they know that they are that big of a seller, I could believe that using Linux is cutting a corner, meaning that it's cutting cost. Because you don't really have to pay any kind of licensing fee necessarily. You just take the kernel and you do your thing. Okay. And there's certainly plenty of smart people in Nintendo that can do that. As to where in the future, I could see where they would come up with a very custom OS that, is very locked down, proprietary, the whole thing, to make sure that you couldn't do, where you could add on games, or you could attach a classic to Magic or something like that to the console to make that happen. Now, sidetrack on all of that. So I could see that future happening, and it's either going to be that, or they're just going to rely completely on the subscription model, which I'm touch and go on that.
I mean, I think you've mentioned before, and I agree with you 100%. I mean, there's benefits to having a mini console that's not online at all. Right. It doesn't have any kind of interconnectivity. So, I mean, adding that into it is one, going to increase the cost of it, and two, kind of open up stuff that both you and I disagree with.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, well, anyway, that boy, I could go forever on that.
Oh yeah, I know.
But this conversation raised something interesting for me, though, that I hadn't thought about, nor have I read anywhere. And this has to do with what will probably eventually be the Game Boy Classic, right? Which there had been a patent that went out, and I think I've mentioned this at some point on Sovryn Tech. There was a patent that was approved where it's a case by Nintendo, a case that goes over your smartphone that has like Game Boy buttons on it and everything.
Yes,
and so the argument, right? So the argument is that might be what ends up being the Game Boy Classic, and I understand it. And Nintendo's not the originator of the idea. There was, I think, Hyperkin themselves were the ones that came up with the original concept of that, and they put it out there.
There was some sort of unique quality to it, though, if I recall, in Nintendo's patent that Hyperkin hadn't had in their version. And I'm trying to remember. Yeah. I'm trying to remember what it was, but it had something to do with the controllers, and for some reason it's just not coming to me right now.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, and a lot of that, if it just connects to your smartphone, there's a lot of software magic, I think, that's going to happen there. For example, you'll probably be able to use Wi-Fi Direct to connect, say, Pokemon Blue and Pokemon Red, between two smartphones and everything. And Nintendo will be uniquely positioned to be able to provide that. I know some emulators can do that anyway already on mobile phones, but they'll obviously make it like I said, magic. They'll make it just work. But the thought that came to mind for me is that I think the Game Boy Classic, maybe more the reason why it's not actually so much a separate device is partly to keep the cost down again. Because and I've been for future Game Talk episodes, I've actually started like replaying a lot of classic Game Boy games. In fact, during one of the hangouts that I had with one of the $100 patrons, he mentioned Mole Mania, and I don't know how I forgot about this game or never even really thought about it, but I got it for Virtual Console on my 3DS, and I've been playing it, and the game's fucking amazing. But here's the thing, is that a lot of Game Boy games they're not just short, they're stupid short. Like, they're 45 minutes short. And I don't know if you can justify a completely separate Game Boy system for $60-$70. Even if you put 50 games on there, you're going to beat every game literally inside of a month. And there's not like a lot of like 2-player action that you can take advantage of that with either. So I'm this conversation has brought to mind for me, I think, maybe the brilliance of Nintendo not just offering a separate Game Boy Classic, even though plenty of people would buy it, but that they're offering something that takes advantage of the modern capabilities of the smartphone.
I could see them. Sure. The other thing is I think there's a possibility if they do come out with a Game Boy Classic, there's a bit of redundancy there with where they do still have a virtual console market on the 3DS.
Right.
So that could be a reason they might not do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. Also, I think of that patent, I'm trying to think about it. I don't think there was an L and R button, so they couldn't even take advantage of the Game Boy Advance, which that sucks because that system is amazing. Go ahead.
What would be interesting if they did turn around and opened up, say, a virtual console market for smartphones, and say had their own sort of app store.
Yeah. And that's something. So see, that's the thing. Like, if they connect it to a smartphone, they could probably sell the smartphone case for like $30. And like, I really think they could get away with that because at the end of the day, it's a controller that's going to give you probably access to some kind of software, and software costs nothing. Generally. Well, I mean, it should cost something, but you get my point. And so then through that, maybe you won't actually even like be buying the games. You will like choose the games you want to purchase. And maybe then they will do some kind of virtual console thing through that. So I think that this makes a lot more sense for the Game Boy Classic. My initial reason why I thought they weren't really doing a full on one was because who's going to carry around 2 devices with them? But then we're talking about, like when we were talking about Squirrel earlier, well, people do kind of carry 2 devices with them. So it's not that crazy of a notion. But yeah, I think this might have more to do with it. Is bringing down the cost and some of the other aspects there, of taking advantage of Wi-Fi Direct and Bluetooth and things like that. So yeah, interesting.
And so, but one thing I do think there is possibly a market for is if for a handheld retro console would be a Game Boy Advance, because I don't think there's hardly any Game Boy Advance titles on the 3DS virtual console store. And
No,
You can't even run the old cartridges on the newer DSs like you used to. So I do think there's room for that.
Yeah, so that could get interesting, and I'll say why. Now, so with the 3DS, there was like when the Virtual Console first came out for the 3DS, they had this like ambassador program.
Right.
I didn't have a 3DS at the time to take advantage of it. You had a very specific amount of time to get within it to be able to buy Game Boy Advance games for your 3DS.
Right.
I think this is the craziest damn thing that.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that they didn't make that available, like, okay, fine, make it exclusive for a couple of years, and then you can let everybody jump on your master program again.
Yeah, people have been
never re-released it.
Yeah, people have been complaining about this for years, and I will tell you, it has been one of the major driving forces behind people hacking the 3DS.
Sure. Yeah. Get the whole new Game Boy Advance emulator on there.
Yeah. Well, no. People have hacked to the point where they've gotten the actual Virtual Console titles that were exclusive to the Ambassador program on their console.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I just think that that's nuts that they've never. I mean, in one sense, like I respect it because for once a game company, here's looking at you, Electronic Arts. For once a game company said something's exclusive, and holy fucking shit is it? You know, like it really, really is. So I kind of respect them. But at one point, like, okay, you know, we're in the later years. Anybody that's still playing a 3DS, it's either a little kid who's not going to know better, or it's people that are really dedicated to the platform. Give those people that are really dedicated, you know, let them have the full experience. Because I'd buy probably every Game Boy Advance game on there, you know, if they were available. I mean, that was such an amazing system. I carried my GBA for around, especially my SP with that clamshell.
Oh yeah, that was
so
great.
long. It was such a great system. Like a Game Boy Advance SP, another like classic, a mini, or I mean, you can't get. Well, you can get it smaller because there was a mini GBA at one point, but you know, to come out with one of those, I think that might happen. And boy, I mean, what an amazing library of games you have to choose from.
Oh yeah.
With that, I mean, some of like the Golden Sun games are two of the best RPGs ever made.
The Castlevania games.
Oh my god. Oh man. Was it Harmony of Dissonance? That was the second one.
Yeah. And Aria of Sorrow.
Yeah. Aria of Sorrow was the huge one. Like that was the hit that nobody's.
There was three, and then there was Circle of the Moon too.
Okay. No. All right. So Circle of the Moon was the first one. Then it was Harmony of Dissonance.
Right.
And then it was Aria of Sorrow.
Yes.
So yeah, Harmony of Dissonance is it's a Castlevania game that takes place like in the far future. It's my favorite one, like of them all. And I play them all. Curse of Darkness, you know, Lament of anyway, hell. Yeah, good call. Like the Castlevania games alone would be a reason to release that thing. And with Castlevania being white hot right now, the Castlevania season 2 is amazing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just finished watching it last night. But I'll say they haven't released a games list yet for the PlayStation Retro Console. And I'm telling you right now, whether or not Symphony of Night is on that console will be the deciding factor of whether I get that thing. Yeah,
absolutely. I'll tell you, I completely agree. Even back in the day when the PlayStation 1 was at its prime, Symphony of the Night was a hard game to get your hands on. And people deserve to play this masterpiece, even though
people don't even realize that it wasn't a great seller when it came out. It was
no, right.
It only got really popular until years afterwards.
Yeah, even though I can't think of the rest of the name of it, but the second place, so the first PlayStation 2 Castlevania game, which was Curse of Darkness, which is amazing. The second one was Lament of something, and that played a lot like Symphony of the Night and was just a ton of fun. But I'll tell you, one of the reasons I keep a modded PS2 is so I can play Symphony of the Night, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, whenever, kind of tickles my fancy. And Nintendo's been very respectful to the Castlevania franchise. I think it was a miss because they left 3. I think they left Castlevania 3 off of the NES Classic, but they did have 1 and 2. And on the SNES, they did put, I think they put Castlevania 4. I don't think, Dracula X was a Genesis game.
Yeah.
But they put Castlevania 4 on there. I mean, so this is something that could happen, and it should happen. is the bottom line. And Symphony of the Night being on the PlayStation Classic, absolutely. So, okay, let's see. Just in the YouTube chat here, I said the same thing Rob said about Metal Gear Solid, but actually I won't buy it if you can't add games to it. Maybe. I don't, again, we know so little at this stage what the PlayStation Classic is going to have. Pretty much right now, we know it's going to have Final Fantasy VII, and which, that's like coming out with a Nintendo machine without Mario. But we really don't know a lot what's going to be possible with it. I personally think that the Commodore 60 or the C64 Mini's ability to add games is an odd one-off. I don't think maybe there's going to be some kind of hack if like the NES Classic and the Super Nintendo Classic where it's Linux based and you have the ability to take advantage of the USB port on it. That's the only way that I think that's going to happen. Though I could be wrong. Maybe they'll make it available. Maybe they'll pull something off. I don't know.
I think either way with the PlayStation Classic, it's going to be a game changer. Either way it goes, whether you can add games or two or not. Because it is kind of like throwing down, like they're entering the kind of like the next giant leap in consoles with these mini consoles.
Yeah,
the PlayStation, and so. I think whatever happens with the PlayStation Classic is going to determine what happens if, or, when or if we ever get an N64 Classic.
Yeah, I think you're right. In fact,
and I know they're going to have to come up with new hardware for that because even the RetroPie has problems running N64 games. So, even though that the NES and SNES Classic can run Wii games, I'm sure it can. I think it's still going to struggle with 64 because there's something unique about that hardware.
Yeah. So, all right, two comments, and then we got to wrap it up. But this is an awesome conversation to be having, and I think if you heard the two Game Talk episodes that I put out so far, I did tease that I would want that I think having Robin on would be brilliant at some point. But these are, to be a co-host on that, but these are video shows. So it'd be interesting how we can make that work. But anyway, so the 2 points, or the initial point to bring up with the N64 Classic is that the re-releases of like Star Fox 64, of Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, you kind of go down the list of a lot, and even Super Mario 64 DS, which I think is absolutely the best version of that game. Uniquely, the N64 Classic, I feel like if they're just going to port raw versions of, like, if it's Super Mario 64 without the DS version, still a great game. But I really do feel like we'd be taking steps backward, because some of these they added in so much and they cleaned up so much. But I don't know. So I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence on that because those cleaned up versions of the games, I love them. I have them on my 3DS and they're great renditions of the game. But here again, would it really be a classic console if we put those version on them? I mean, kind of like the whole point of a classic console is sort of like to relive those games as they existed at the time.
Yeah. I hear you. It's just, I don't know if I could do it. Like, I don't know if I could go back to playing like Star Fox 64 just as Star Fox 64. Or like even like, one of the biggest titles for the N64 was Shadows of the Empire, Star Wars Shadows of the Empire.
Yeah.
And if I had to go back to that without all the really cool PC cutscenes and a lot of other stuff, I don't know. It's unique in that it's the only system where that's an issue, where that's a thing. So I think this is Nintendo's got to be thinking long and hard about it, because I'm surprised they haven't announced another system this year, and they haven't.
This might be
maybe
why
they will. Go ahead.
Yeah, this might be why.
That's what I was going to say. Is I think this might be why, because this is actually a really, really big like, this is a tough issue. I don't want to say it's a problem, but it's a tough issue to like consider. So now the second point I just want to bring up, and then we got to wrap it up, is that gaming is such a big deal now, that like everybody kind of games in one form or fashion, like in some form or fashion. Everybody's a gamer, really, I think today. I mean, I guess there's some people they're like people that don't use Facebook, they're kind of the rarity, unfortunately, or well, as far as with Facebook, with gaming, I'd say otherwise. But we're getting to the point where gaming is such a big industry that now we really are. There's always sort of been subgenres. We're like, oh, I'm more into fighting games, or oh, I'm more into RPGs or JRPGs or something like that. But now we're really getting to the point where the gaming industry has to like split into multiple industries in a very real and literal sense that is only possible when something gets to the size that the gaming industry has gotten to. And with that in mind, I think we're going to get to I think we're coming up. I think you're right, where what the game changer that the PlayStation Classic is going to be. I've been feeling this for a while with the retro consoles, that we're going to get to the point where we're not going to have like 8th, 9th, 10th generation consoles so much. And that you're just trying to get everybody's eyes on those. You're going to get people who are into the 9th gen consoles, and then you're going to get people that are into this console series. Be it, say, the retro consoles or the Intellivision or whatever, something like that. Like it's that big now to where it's just going to like separate to, Neanderthals and Homo sapiens sapiens.
That's going to get really interesting on the software end.
Yeah, right.
Because you're going to start having software developers going, basically these console, people are creating the consoles are dividing our market.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think this almost has to happen because, again, the budgets for your Battlefields, your Call of Duties, like these almost $1 billion feels like budgets, over time with all the expansions and everything that these games have to have. Like you can't keep that afloat. There can't be game, dev houses that can keep afloat constantly doing that. We've talked about that with Telltale Games and so on.
I just thought of something else too. Is just, it's really going to open up a whole new secondary market too. I think if it really starts going in that direction, you're going to see these companies releasing dev kits for classic consoles for the average person. Cool. Yeah. That would be really cool. Which, you used to be able to, as long as you could hash out. Like I remember I almost bought a dev version of the PlayStation 1. At the time they were like $800, Yeah.
And I wanted to just,
but it's just going to be a software package that runs on your computer. It's not going to be actually like a dev kit. It'll be like something that works on your computer.
Yeah, that could get really cool. Like, that's the thing that's what I'm saying is that there could be a second generation of all of these retro consoles.
Right.
And it'd be just as exciting and valid as when when we had our PS2s and we were waiting for the PS3.
Right. Well, like I said, it could open up a whole new secondary market, not just for the classic games, but for new games that run on classic consoles.
Exactly. And I think that kind of speaks to, actually there's another comment in the YouTube chat. He says, I haven't seen the 3DS versions you're talking about, but N64 graphics really don't hold up as well as 8-bit and 16-bit systems.
Well, it's true for all 3D games from that era. Even on the PlayStation, it just looks, it looks jagged and janky as hell.
Yeah, some of those can, some of that can, it's got to be like particularly charming to really work. I think re-releasing it on handhelds is what lets it get away with it because it's so small compared to being on the big screen that you don't notice so much. Like, Ocarina of Time looks fine. Star Fox 64 looks fine, and so on. Even though in some of those cases for the 3DS re-releases, they did update the graphics pretty significantly. But yeah, like this is actually, here's another one. Maybe someone says in the YouTube chat, maybe we'll get some official online multiplayer N64 stuff, Mario Kart or GoldenEye or Super Smash Brothers. I could see that happening. GoldenEye is one of those games that does look like really ugly and does not hold up. The only way you're going to get those to look good is if you're running them on a CRT, and even those are getting harder to find these days. Yeah. So that there's a challenge there too. Now with Golden, I get the point about getting like online multiplayer and all that, but then at the same time, I talk about something artificial. I kind of want the artificial barrier that we don't have to have today, but where no, this doesn't connect to the internet, I've brought that up many times. And no, if you want to play GoldenEye with me, guess what? You're going to have to move to New Hampshire. You're going to have to be my neighbor. and believe me, I am happy to host you. I'll buy all the pizza and whatever, it'll be a great time. But yeah, so there's like, I appreciate that. But at the same time, I'd like it to almost be like forced that no, you've got to be in the same room with each other. And I think Nintendo might actually be thinking that as well right now, but I don't know. So anyway, this conversation could go on forever for what we want. But I will wrap this up now, because speaking of pizza, I think I might go get one. And celebrate my 7th anniversary in New Hampshire, of all things, for having moved here.
Happy anniversary, man.
Robin, man, always. Yeah, what's that?
Happy anniversary, man.
Thank you. Yeah, Robin, it's always great having you. I love it when you join on. Always great talking with you. It's great talking with Daniel earlier either. And someone in the YouTube chat said, I take you up on that. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. You come on down. So anyway, we'll wrap this up now. And of course, this is not the last to come out for October 2018. Some very exciting episodes to come up. Of course, your Sovryn Tech Prime episode will be out later tonight. The release of this in audio version should be out. If not tonight, it will be out tomorrow, along with there might be a twofer. And then Tuesday, I believe Robin and I will be doing our Star Wars update on Tuesday. That'll get released Tuesday, probably later on Tuesday. And then Wednesday is the first episode of User. And oh man, I can't wait for you guys to sink your teeth into that. It's going to be a great time. So anyway, that's lots still to come out for October, even though we're in the final days, as it were. But that'll wrap this up. I will see all of you on the other side.